Hello, my name is Billy-Ray Belcourt. I am from the Driftpile Cree Nation in Northwest Alberta in Canada. I currently live in Vancouver, British Columbia, on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh. I'm an associate professor in the School of Creative Writing at the University of British Columbia, and I teach poetry, fiction, and Indigenous creative writing. I did a master's degree in women's studies at the University of Oxford at Wadham College, and I did my PhD in English at the University of Alberta. My work is generally concerned with colonialism and Indigenous peoples' resistance to it, both historically and in the present. I have written three books of prose and three of poetry, and across that body of writing, I have been interested in grappling with how colonialism shapes aesthetic perception, how it governs what is seen to be quote unquote proper literary work. I'm interested in the way that Indigenous writers have upended those expectations in order to do the work that they need to do, both for themselves and for their communities. The idea of an entire life, my most recent publication, is a collection of poems that revolves around two images, the image of a poplar tree and of the reserve. So when I wrote my first book of poetry called This Wound is a World, I wrote from a place of desperation. I wanted really desperately to live a full queer Indigenous life, and I wasn't sure if I would attain it. The idea of an entire life began with the realization that I have that life now. And so I wanted to think through the ways a queer Indigenous existence is hampered by history, but nonetheless full of possibility. What will the rest of my life make available to me? I wondered, how has the 20th century indelibly shaped me and my community? So the book is about my reserve in Northern Alberta, the Driftpile Cree Nation, how the past tailgates me wherever I go. It's about my coming into being as a queer Indigenous person and how I tried to remake my conditions of living to enable flourishing and possibility. I think it both extends my previous poetic interests, but also turns towards some new thematic terrain. So with this book, I'm grappling with my childhood in a deliberate way, in a way I haven't done before. I think weirdly enough, I thought that I wouldn't write about my childhood, or that to write about it, I would have to write obliquely or obscurely. And at some point, when I started working on the book, I realized that there was a lot I hadn't fully thought through. And for me, poetry has always been a way to think through what has felt unthinkable. I worked on this book primarily in Vancouver, mostly at my desk, just off screen over here, beside all these books that feel like they could come towering down on me any moment. And I also was working on these books while I was teaching poetry. I was also working on the idea of an entire life while I was teaching poetry and fiction and Indigenous writing. And I was thinking with my students about how poetry is a way to insist on our freedom against the grain of colonialism and other forms of oppression. We were thinking about the poem in the tradition that Audre Lorde imagined for us, which is as a um, way to theorize about and put into practice one's desires for freedom. So I suppose this book was my attempt to actually put into practice what I was teaching and thinking about. The experience of putting this collection together felt at times really raw and vulnerable because of the subject matter, but also it felt exciting and generative, and it returned me to theorists in particular that I felt really influenced by throughout my life. Lauren Berlant, Jose Esteban Munoz, Avery Gordon, and others. It felt like a necessary break from prose writing, which I had been fully immersed in for quite a while at that point. I felt that I was always having to write my way out of poems in order to write prose. And so it felt like a kind of homecoming to return to poetry and to not have to put aside my poetic instincts in order to do the work that was expected of me. I could actually just, draw on that instinct and nurture it. One of my favorite pieces in the collection is called 20th Century History. There's two poems with that same title. And they, for me, perhaps most perfectly encapsulate the conceptual interests of the book. And I'm going to read one of them, the first one that appears. 20th Century Cree History. Nothing is truly inexpressible. Picture the women waiting at the forest center, their hands folded into little coffins. Not even the snow falls with such imprecise hunger. In time, love deranges all of us. In time, all love is reduced to the childlessness of music. A painting of a palace with 600 rooms, in each a mechanical bull thronging violently. Most days, my job is to work out the difference between truth and honesty, true or false. We are a closer catastrophe than heaven. Thank you.